Welcome back to the last video in this year's series on fly fishing hatches. I'm Raj Kletke, and in this part we'll quickly discuss a few remaining hatches, have a quick summary of what hatches we did cover, and have a few closing comments. In our classification of hatches that we introduced in the introduction to this series, we still have the hatches that were classified under abundant organisms. Remember our definition of a hatch. We didn't use it as the scientifically correct term for the transition of an egg to a later stage, or even as commonly used by fishermen to signify just the emergence of organisms. Our definition included pre-emergent, emergent, and post-emergent organisms, as well as occasionally even non-aquatic insects. We should quickly mention behavioral drift. Should we include that in our definition? Behavioral drift does usually get trout actively feeding, but that is due to multiple different organisms in the drift. We're limiting our definition to when a single organism is present in adequate numbers that they may elicit active feeding by trout. Then we can tie specific fly patterns for that single organism, which is part of the definition of our hatch. By our definition, I believe I've fished a sowbug hatch, if there is such a thing. On a specific river, I often use a sowbug pattern in tandem with another searching nymph. Commonly, I catch fish on both patterns in approximately equal numbers, but occasionally I'll catch fish almost exclusively on the sowbug patterns. I'm assuming that for whatever reason, sowbugs are temporarily significantly increased in numbers in the drift and are eliciting active feeding by trout. In other words, our definition of a hatch. In fact, it seems like selective feeding is taking place. However, this hatch is unrecognizable to me, and fishing it is the same as fishing in a searching mode using a sowbug pattern. I discussed sowbugs and scuds more in my Simple Entomology series. They are very useful patterns on many rivers, so please review these videos if you aren't familiar with these organisms. The other abundance type hatch I got to fish was when flying ants hit the surface of a river I was fishing. It was as close to a super hatch that you might want to see. I fish ants commonly, but these were size 22 to 24 ants, and even trimmed, my ants didn't come close to the proper size. I tried trimming multiple midge patterns and blue-winged olive patterns, but nothing worked. I now carry a few winged size number 22 black ants in my fly box. I hope to see this hatch again, but so far I haven't. But a few size 22 ant patterns don't take up much space in your fly box, so you might want to carry some also. I've been told that occasionally larger flying ants may also cause a super hatch. I do carry larger ant patterns, so hopefully I'll be ready if I ever see one of those. In this series, we spent some time analyzing a trico spinner that we had tied, and I hope this will help you think about the flies that you tie and how they represent the natural to the trout in or on the water. When fishing the trico hatch, we briefly discussed several of the casts and mending techniques that you'll need. We have mentioned tippet selection in several videos. After fishing the trico spinner fall, we generalized and extrapolated, so hopefully you'll know how to recognize and fish other spinner falls also. We looked at the most common pattern of pre-emergence and emergence for mayflies using the blue-winged olive as our prototype, and at some fairly common variations using the March brown as our prototype here. We mentioned some emergences that occur out of the water, both for a few mayfly species, and related them to the similar emergence of stoneflies. So now you should be able to approach almost any mayfly or stonefly pre-emergence, emergence, or post-emergence with at least some knowledge of the best fly patterns and when and how to fish them. We spent quite a bit of time discussing the common modes of caddis pre-emergence and emergence, as well as the post-emergence hatch, in other words, the egg-laying caddis. These videos should have helped you understand when and why certain caddis patterns should be fished. We also fished a couple of very specific caddis hatches that appear at first slightly different than the most common caddis, but are actually just variations of the egg-laying hatches by caddis. Before we mentioned the abundant type of hatches in this video, we finished with midge hatches, which are often ignored by fishermen, and I hope I convinced you to fish them this year. So we covered, either directly or through extrapolation, most of the hatches you'll see in a given year on most trout streams. Sometimes you'll recognize hatches easily because they are on the surface and there are many rising fish. Some might occur below the surface, so you might not recognize them. Hopefully you will now think of the possibility of pre-emergent active mayfly nymphs, deep caddis pupa, migrating mayfly and stonefly nymphs, as well as the nearly ubiquitous pre-emergent midge pupa, adding to your hatch fishing time on the water. The super hatches, in other words, the very heavy hatches, are usually obvious, but they're also the hardest to fish. There's just too many naturals competing with your fly. You may need to try different stages and patterns. I hope these videos have helped you learn what to watch for and think about the possibility of the more moderate or even sparse hatches that many fishermen miss. These hatches are often easier to successfully fish. At least you should be able to more intelligently choose an appropriate dropper to put on your favorite searching fly while you're probing for an unrecognized hatch. I don't know if these videos fully met the goal we stated at the beginning of this series, but at least I hope you're inspired to learn more about hatches and you will expand your hatch fishing this season. Thanks for watching these videos and previous series. I've had fun and learned some new things doing these videos. I hope you've learned something new also. I hope these videos will help you enjoy your fly tying and trout fishing even more. I'm Raj Kletke, and I'll possibly see you again next winter.